I stood among the splintered remains of what had once been my grandfather's workshop. Jagged pieces of hand-carved wood, crushed power tools, and decades of memories reduced to rubble. Rain soaked through my work clothes as I knelt down and picked up his old hand plane, the one that survived 2 world wars only to be destroyed by neighborhood politics. The polished wooden handle still carried the impression of his grip, now split clean down the middle. Behind me, Mrs. Westfield stood with arms crossed, surrounded by HOA board members and demolition contractors. Her voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Perhaps next time you will follow community guidelines, Mr. Mitchell." I clutched the broken tool in my trembling hands, feeling something shift inside me. Not just grief, but a cold, calculated resolve. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They had no idea that my desk at the county courthouse gave me access to every property record, every transaction, every legal filing in Pine Grove Estates for the past decade. That is when I realized they had just destroyed the last physical connection to my grandfather, but I was about to become their worst nightmare. The cabin stood exactly as I remembered it from childhood: weathered pine boards, river stone chimney, and a front porch that sagged ever so slightly in the middle. This modest structure among towering pines had been my sanctuary every summer since I was 7 years old. I parked my truck in the gravel drive and sat for a moment, letting memories wash over me. This was no longer just a summer retreat. After my divorce finalized last month, this inherited cabin represented my fresh start, my healing place. "Welcome home," I whispered to myself as I climbed the familiar steps. Inside, everything remained preserved in amber. Grandfather's rocking chair still faced the fireplace. His collection of hand-carved songbirds still lined the mantel. The dining table where he taught me to whittle my first chess piece remained positioned by the east window to catch the morning light. I ran my hand across the kitchen countertop he had built from a single slab of local maple. "I hope I can do this place justice, Grandpa," I said to the empty room. That first week passed in peaceful coexistence with my memories. I unpacked my meager possessions, finding places among his treasures. I walked the property line, reacquainting myself with every tree, every rock formation. Each evening I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching sunset paint the pines gold, then crimson, then deep purple. The first letter arrived on day 9. Clean white envelope with Pine Grove Estates Homeowners Association, printed in formal serif type in the corner. I tore it open, curious rather than concerned. "Dear new resident," it began, "welcome to our community. Please note several violations of community standards have been observed at your property." The list included excessive natural woodland undergrowth and non-regulation mailbox post. The letter concluded with a request to remedy these issues within 14 days. I sighed but complied. I cleared some of the wilder brush nearest the road and replaced the hand-carved mailbox post with a standard white one from the hardware store. The natural character of the property diminished slightly, but keeping peace seemed worthwhile. 3 days later, another letter arrived citing improper exterior illumination, regarding the porch light grandfather had installed decades ago. I replaced it with an approved fixture. 2 weeks into my residence, Pine Grove Estates held their monthly HOA meeting. I attended, hopping to introduce myself properly to my neighbors. Most seemed pleasant enough, nodding politely as I took a seat in the back row. Then Karen Westfield swept into the room. Her perfectly coiffed silver hair and designer pantsuit immediately communicated authority. She called the meeting to order and proceeded to dictate community business with rigid precision. I noticed several neighbors shrink in their seats when Karen directed her attention their way. When she mentioned renewed enforcement of community standards, her gaze lingered pointedly on me. After the meeting, an elderly gentleman named Frank approached me in the parking lot. "Mitchell, is it? You must be Edward's grandson." "Yes, sir, you knew my grandfather." Frank nodded solemnly. "Known him for 40 years. Good man, Edward. Had his troubles with the Westfields, though." "Troubles?" "Property line dispute back in the 80s. Your grandfather's land originally extended all the way to the lake before Old Man Westfield contested the survey. That woman running things now, Karen, she is his daughter-in-law, never forgave your grandfather for fighting back. That night I searched through grandfather's desk. In the bottom drawer, I found a yellowed folder containing survey maps, property deeds, and correspondence with the county assessor. Paperclipped to one document was a faded photograph showing grandfather arguing with a younger man beside a property marker. Written on the back in my grandfather's precise handwriting, "Thomas Westfield trespassing again. 1982. I stared at the photograph, feeling an odd chill. The peaceful inheritance I had counted on was already showing cracks as storm clouds gathered on the horizon. The sharp knock at my door came at precisely 8:30 on a Tuesday morning. I opened it to find Karen Westfield standing on my porch, clipboard in hand, designer sunglasses perched atop her head. Behind her, a silver Mercedes gleamed in my driveway. "Good morning, Mr. Mitchell. I am Karen Westfield, president of Pine Grove Estates Homeowners Association. I thought we might walk the property together to discuss ongoing concerns." Without waiting for my response, she stepped past me and began scrutinizing my living room. Wood stacking against the interior wall is a fire hazard. The curtains do not match approved community color schemes. That mounted deer head is expressly prohibited under Section 12.4 of our bylaws. I blinked in confusion. Those restrictions apply inside private homes. Karen continued as if I had not spoken. She moved through my cabin like a health inspector in a questionable restaurant, making notes and clicking her tongue disapprovingly. Outside, she pointed to invisible infractions with manicured fingernails. Non-conforming garden bed borders, unapproved bird feeding station, recreational equipment visible from the street. The recreational equipment is a hand plane my grandfather used to teach me carpentry, I explained, trying to maintain composure. It has sentimental value. Sentiment does not supersede standards, Mr. Mitchell. Our community maintains its property values through strict adherence to guidelines. She handed me a multi-page document listing 27 violations, most of which appeared nowhere in the community guidelines I had received. "You have 14 days to remedy these issues or face daily fines." That afternoon, I noticed a car driving slowly past my property. The driver photographed my cabin before continuing down the road. The same vehicle passed again the following day, and the day after. My neighbor Frank confirmed my suspicions when I described the situation. Karen documents everything. She keeps files on every homeowner who has ever crossed her. The Millers 3 doors down spent thousands defending themselves against her claims before they finally sold at a loss. The Hendersons lost their koi pond last spring. The Wungs were fined daily for their daughter's basketball hoop until they removed it. I decided to attend the next HOA meeting armed with the community guidelines and notes about selective enforcement. When the floor opened for resident comments, I raised my hand. "I would like to address inconsistencies in enforcement procedures and request clarification on internal versus external regulations." Karen interrupted before I could continue. We have many items on the agenda tonight. Please submit your concerns in writing for board review at a later date. But several of these violations directly contradict Section 8 of the bylaws, which states, "Your time is up, Mr. Mitchell. Next item of business." The meeting continued as if I had not spoken. Afterward, I overheard board members discussing my property in hushed tones. Clearly not community standard material. That eyesore should never have been grandfathered in. We will need to escalate enforcement. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived announcing a $500 fine for continued noncompliance and confrontational behavior at community meetings. That evening, I spread the community guidelines across my dining table and began highlighting contradictions, vague language, and selectively enforced rules. My legal training as a paralegal kicked in as I documented dates, photographed my property, and compiled evidence of disparate treatment. I called the county recorder's office, where I worked, and spoke with my supervisor. "Sarah, I need to research some property records for Pine Grove Estates. Is it all right if I use the system after hours tomorrow?" "Personal research, Tom. You could say that. Having some HOA issues at my grandfather's old place." Sarah chuckled. "Let me guess, Karen Westfield on your case. She has quite the reputation around here. Stay late as you need. Just log your time separately." That night I found myself unable to sleep. I stood at the window watching moonlight filter through pine branches. A car drove slowly past my property, headlights off. In the dim light, I recognized Karen Westfield, camera in hand, documenting some new perceived violation. I realized then that this was not random harassment. This was targeted and personal. The feud between my grandfather and the Westfields had not ended with his passing. It had merely transferred to me. What I did not yet understand was why this battle mattered so much to them. What I did know was that my position at the county courthouse was about to become very valuable indeed. April sunshine streamed through the windows of my grandfather's cabin as I measured the dimensions of the old garden shed. The weathered structure had stood unused since his passing, filled with rusty tools and forgotten projects. I envisioned something new, a small writing studio where I could work on weekends, a peaceful retreat within a retreat. I consulted the HOA guidelines carefully before beginning. Section 14.2 permitted renovation of existing structures not exceeding original footprint. Section 14.5 specified acceptable materials and colors. I photographed every stage of preparation to document compliance. The work brought me closer to my grandfather. I used his old tools, the hand plane, the level with his initials carved into the handle, the set of chisels he had inherited from his father. Each evening, my muscles ached pleasantly from honest labor. Each morning, I awoke eager to continue. "Looking good," Frank called out one afternoon, walking over from his property with 2 glasses of lemonade. "Edward would be proud to see you working with his tools." "I can almost feel him guiding my hands sometimes," I admitted, accepting the cool drink gratefully. Frank nodded toward the road. "Just so you know, Karen has been watching. Took about 30 photos yesterday." "Let her. I have documentation proving this complies with all regulations. The footprint is unchanged. The height is regulation. The materials and colors are approved." Documentation did not help the Jacksons when they tried to build a wheelchair ramp for their mother, Frank warned. "Be careful." 3 weeks into the project, the studio neared completion. Pine board walls, a single window facing the forest, a small desk built from my grandfather's leftover lumber. I had even restored his old desk lamp to place upon it. The space smelled of sawdust and possibility. Then came the call from the courthouse. "Tom, we need you in Springfield for the Wilson case depositions," my supervisor explained. "3 days minimum, possibly 5. Can you leave tomorrow?" I packed reluctantly, securing tarps over the studio's new roof in case of rain. Grandfather's tools I organized carefully in their cases, storing them inside the nearly completed structure. "Frank," I called to my neighbor as I loaded my truck, "would you mind keeping an eye on the place while I am gone? Work trip came up suddenly." "Will do. How long will you be away?" "Not more than 5 days. Everything is up to code, but you know how Karen gets when no one is watching." 5 days stretched to 7 due to complications with witness testimony. I called Frank twice, receiving reassurances that all remained well. On the 8th day, I finally turned onto the familiar pine-lined road leading to my cabin, eager to complete my studio project. What I saw stopped my heart. Where my grandfather's renovated workshop had stood was now a pile of splintered wood, broken glass, and twisted metal. Heavy equipment tracks marred the soft ground around the destruction. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the breeze. I stumbled from my vehicle in disbelief. Among the wreckage lay grandfather's tools. The hand-carved handles splintered, metal components bent and rusted from exposure to recent rain. The plane that had shaped lumber for 3 generations lay crushed beneath fallen roof beams. A large orange notice had been stapled to what remained of the door. Structure DEMOLISHED per HOA Directive, Unauthorized Construction Section 14.8 violation. I stood paralyzed, unable to process the devastation before me. Every piece of splintered wood represented hours of careful work. Every broken tool contained irreplaceable memories. Frank appeared at my side, his face drawn with concern. "I tried to stop them, Tom. They came with a demolition crew 2 days ago. I showed them your documentation, told them you were away on business. Karen said the board had voted in emergency session. She had some paper claiming the structure exceeded permitted dimensions." "That is impossible. I measured everything precisely." "I know, son. I have something you should see." Frank led me to his house and pulled up security camera footage on his computer. The images showed Karen Westfield directing workers as they dismantled my studio. She pointed, gestured, even smiled as the roof came down. Most disturbing was the moment she held up my grandfather's antique level, examined it, then deliberately dropped it onto the concrete footing where it shattered. "I installed these cameras after what happened to the Jacksons," Frank explained. "Been recording everything that happens on our street for 2 years now." Rain began falling as we walked back to the destruction site. I knelt among the debris, retrieving pieces of grandfather's broken tools. Water soaked through my clothes as I cradled the shattered hand plane. Karen's Mercedes pulled alongside the property. She stepped out under an umbrella, flanked by 2 board members. "Perhaps next time you will follow community guidelines, Mr. Mitchell," she called out, voice carrying on the damp air. I looked up at her, rain mingling with tears I refused to acknowledge. Something shifted inside me, not just grief, but cold, calculated resolve. They had destroyed the last physical connection to my grandfather, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. No idea that every property transaction, every legal document, every filing in this county passed across my desk. This was no longer about a renovated shed or homeowner guidelines. This was war. Monday morning found me at my desk in the county courthouse 40 minutes before my official start time. For 5 years, I had served as a paralegal in the Property Records Division, processing deeds, liens, easements, and property transactions with quiet efficiency. My colleagues considered me meticulous but unremarkable. Today, that perception would serve me well. I signed into the county database and began with basic research. Pine Grove Estates. Established 1976. Original developer, Westfield Properties. Current HOA registration, board member history, bylaw amendments. By noon, I had compiled the official history. By 5 o'clock, I had spotted the first inconsistency. "Sarah," I called to my supervisor as she prepared to leave, "have you ever seen contingency clauses in HOA charter renewals?" She paused at my desk. "Contingency clauses, not typically. Why?" I turned my monitor toward her. Pine Grove Estates HOA filed their renewal in 2018 with language granting the board president unilateral emergency powers for community standard preservation. The clause references Appendix C, but there is no Appendix C in the filed document. Sarah frowned. "That should have been flagged during processing. Who approved this?" The signature belonged to Judge Hamilton Marshall. A quick search revealed his brother-in-law was Leonard Westfield, Karen's husband. "Interesting," Sarah murmured. "What exactly are you looking for, Tom?" I explained the demolition of my workshop while omitting my growing suspicions. Sarah listened thoughtfully. "Talk to Raymond in legal services tomorrow. If you are dealing with what I think you are dealing with, you will need guidance." Raymond Diaz had served as senior attorney for the county for 22 years. His office walls displayed photographs with 3 different governors and numerous civic awards. "Small potatoes," he declared after hearing my story. "HOA harassment happens every day. Courts generally defer to association authority unless you can prove discrimination or corruption." "What would constitute proof of corruption?" I asked. Raymond leaned back in his chair. "Pattern of selective enforcement targeting specific homeowners, financial impropriety, conflicts of interest between board members and vendors, procedural violations in meetings or elections." He shrugged. "Difficult to prove without internal documents." "And if I could access public records indicating such patterns?" Raymond studied me carefully. "Your position gives you access to property transactions, yes. That might reveal interesting patterns if someone knew what to look for." He handed me his card. "Keep this conversation theoretical, understand? But call me if your theoretical research yields theoretical results." For the next 3 weeks, I arrived early and stayed late. I created a separate notebook for my findings, careful to access only public records within my professional purview. The pattern emerged slowly at first, then with unmistakable clarity. Pine Grove Estates had seen 26 homeowners forced to sell between 2019 and 2024. Each followed the same sequence. HOA complaints escalated rapidly, fines accumulated, liens were placed on properties. Foreclosures or distress sales followed. The buyer in 18 of these transactions. Shell companies all traceable to Summit Development Group, owned by Leonard Westfield, Karen's husband. Properties purchased at 30 to 40% below market value were renovated minimally, then resold at premium prices, or converted to rental units charging double the area's average rates. Most damning was the correlation between HOA complaint records and Summit acquisition targets. Properties that refused initial low offers from Summit mysteriously began receiving frequent HOA violations. I expanded my search to neighboring communities. 3 additional HOAs showed similar patterns, all with leadership connections to the Westfields or their business associates. The web grew more complex as I dug deeper. Board election records showed procedural irregularities. Financial statements revealed service contracts awarded to companies with family connections to board members. Bylaw amendments had been implemented without proper homeowner notifications. In my living room, I created a comprehensive map. Red string connected photographs, documents, and property records across my wall. Names, dates, transactions, all forming a constellation of corruption with Karen and Leonard Westfield at the center. I discovered my grandfather's name in multiple records. His property, my cabin, represented the last original homestead not controlled by Westfield interests. The legal battle he fought in the 1980s had prevented the development of lakefront condominiums on what was originally his land. The picture clarified. My grandfather had been the only successful obstacle to complete Westfield control of Pine Grove Estates. His death had created opportunity. My inheritance represented the final barrier to their decades-long acquisition strategy. The demolition of my workshop was not random harassment. It was calculated pressure, the first step in forcing me to sell just as others had before me. At the courthouse, I began quietly preparing document requests for official investigations, violations of open meeting laws, improper notice of bylaw amendments, selective enforcement documentation, financial disclosure requirements for board members with business interests affecting the community. "You look like a man with purpose these days," Sarah commented one afternoon. "Just developing a deeper appreciation for property law," I replied, not looking up from my monitor. "Raymond mentioned you have been consulting with him. Must be serious." I finally met her gaze. "Did you know Pine Grove Estates has had 26 distress sales in 5 years, all purchased by companies connected to the HOA president's husband?" Sarah's expression hardened. "That would explain the unusual transaction volume. You building a case?" "I am building the truth," I answered. "And it appears my name is on the only property document standing between the Westfields and complete control of Pine Grove Estates." The pieces were coming together. Now I needed allies who could help me use this information effectively. The coffee shop 3 towns over provided anonymity for sensitive conversations. I selected a corner table with good sightlines to both the entrance and the emergency exit. "Mr. Mitchell, I am Janet Cooper. We spoke on the phone." The woman who slid into the seat across from me looked nothing like I expected. Her silver hair was pulled into a practical bun, reading glasses hung from a chain around her neck, and her cardigan suggested a librarian rather than a victim of predatory real estate practices. "Thank you for meeting me, Mrs. Cooper. As I mentioned, I am researching HOA practices in Pine Grove Estates." Janet removed a thick folder from her tote bag. 3 years of harassment documented in these pages, 32 violations in 6 months, fines totaling $27,000. We had lived there for 40 years without incident until Karen Westfield became president. What precipitated the sudden enforcement? We declined an offer from Summit Development. Apparently, our half-acre had strategic value for their new construction plans. 2 days after we refused, violation notices began arriving. Janet's story matched the pattern perfectly. I recorded her statement, had her sign an affidavit, and added her documentation to my growing collection. Over the next 2 weeks, I met with 14 former Pine Grove residents. Each shared nearly identical experiences, refused offers from Summit Development, followed by aggressive HOA enforcement, escalating fines, and eventual distress sales. Marcus Washington, a former board member, provided particularly valuable insights. Board meetings were theater, he explained, nursing a cup of black coffee. Real decisions happened at Karen's dinner parties. Votes were determined before we ever entered the meeting room. Why did no one challenge this? Marcus looked down. Fear, mostly. Leonard Westfield has connections throughout the county. Banks, businesses, political offices. Cross the Westfields, suddenly your loan application is denied, your business permits are delayed, your children are not selected for honors programs. Did you document any of the private voting or procedural violations? Marcus hesitated, then pulled out his phone. Audio recordings of 4 dinner party meetings where official votes were predetermined. I kept them as insurance when I finally sold my place and moved. The recordings provided clear evidence of open meeting law violations. Karen's voice was unmistakable as she instructed board members how to vote on specific enforcement actions. My collection of evidence grew daily. Financial records revealed HOA funds used for consultants connected to Summit Development. Aerial photographs documented selective enforcement properties with identical features, received violations only if they had declined Summit purchase offers. I connected with Sophia Lawson, an investigative reporter who had been tracking similar patterns across the county. The Westfields are not unique, she explained when we met in a public park far from Pine Grove. Predatory HOAs operate throughout the region. What makes your case special is the documentation you have acquired and your position within the county record system. You can see connections others cannot. Is there enough for a story? More than enough for a series, but publishing alone will not bring justice. You need legal action simultaneous with public exposure. I have been consulting with the county's senior attorney. Sophia nodded approvingly. Raymond Diaz, good choice. He has been trying to build a case against predatory development practices for years, lacked sufficient evidence until now. I spent evenings preparing legal documents, challenging the HOA's actions on multiple fronts. 1. Violation of open meeting laws through predetermined votes. 2. Improper constitution of the HOA board through invalid elections. 3. Failure to maintain proper financial records and disclosures. 4. Selective enforcement targeting specific properties. 5. Conflicts of interest between board members and development companies. 6. Procedural violations in rule enforcement and fining process. Each claim included supporting affidavits, photographs, financial records, and property transaction histories. Raymond reviewed my work, suggesting strategic adjustments to maximize impact. File complaints with multiple agencies simultaneously, he advised. County Board of Supervisors, State Attorney General's Office, Department of Real Estate, County Recorder. Create too many fronts for them to fight effectively. I arranged for proper service of documents to all involved parties. 12 process servers would deliver complaints to board members, Summit Development executives, and regulatory agencies at precisely 9:00 a.m. on Monday. The weekend before filing, I visited grandfather's grave with a progress report. You fought them alone, I said to the quiet headstone. I am bringing reinforcements. At home, I stared at the wall of evidence I had assembled. Red strings connecting documents formed a web of corruption so obvious it seemed impossible no one had acted before. Fear, I realized, had been the Westfield's greatest weapon. Fear of authority, fear of financial ruin, fear of standing alone against a powerful family. I would not stand alone. And on Monday morning, neither would Karen Westfield. Her name would appear on every complaint, every affidavit, every investigation request filed with county and state authorities. The Westfields had never faced an adversary with my unique combination of legal knowledge, courthouse access, and personal motivation. That was about to change. The Pine Grove Estates Community Center buzzed with unprecedented attendance. Word had spread about serious allegations, requiring an emergency meeting. Homeowners filled every chair, lined the walls, and crowded the doorway, their collective anxiety charging the air with tension. I arrived 10 minutes early, accompanied by Raymond Diaz and Sophia Lawson. We selected seats in the third row, centered, visible but not confrontational. 3 former residents who had provided affidavits sat nearby, nervous but determined. Karen Westfield entered precisely at 7 o'clock, flanked by board members and Summit Development's attorney. Her practiced smile faltered momentarily when she noticed me, then reasserted itself with mechanical precision. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she began, shuffling papers at the podium. "It has come to our attention that certain baseless allegations have been made regarding board operations. We have called this meeting to address these rumors directly and transparently." The Summit attorney stepped forward. "Any claims of impropriety are categorically denied. The board has operated in strict accordance with community guidelines. Individuals spreading defamatory statements may face legal consequences." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Karen raised her hand for silence. "Now, our first agenda item concerns landscape maintenance standards for the upcoming season." Raymond nodded to me. It was time. I stood, interrupting Karen mid-sentence. "Point of order, Madam President. Before proceeding with regular business, the community should be informed that formal complaints have been filed this morning with the County Board of Supervisors, State Attorney General's Office, Department of Real Estate, and County Recorder regarding numerous violations of law by this board." The room fell silent. Karen's smile remained fixed, but her knuckles whitened around the podium edge. "Mr. Mitchell, there is a procedure for resident comments at the conclusion of our meeting. Please be seated." "This is not a resident comment, Mrs. Westfield. This is notification of legal proceedings that directly impact this meeting's validity." Raymond stood beside me. "As county senior attorney, I can confirm multiple investigations have commenced today examining this HOA's operations." Karen's composure cracked slightly. "This is inappropriate and disruptive. If you cannot respect our procedures, you will be asked to leave." "Procedures matter greatly, Mrs. Westfield. For instance, the procedure for amending HOA bylaws requires written notice to all homeowners 30 days prior to voting. No such notice was provided for the 17 amendments passed since 2019. I opened my folder and began methodically presenting evidence, item by item. Financial disclosures required under state law have not been filed for 3 consecutive years. Board election ballots from 2021 show 47 more votes than eligible homeowners. HOA funds paid $157,000 to consulting firms owned by board members' family members without competitive bidding. With each statement, I placed corresponding documentation on the table before the board. Karen's attempts to interrupt grew increasingly desperate as I continued. "Most concerning is the pattern of selective enforcement targeting specific properties, those that declined purchase offers from Summit Development, which is owned by Board President Westfield's husband." The crowd's murmuring grew louder. Several homeowners stood, adding their own complaints. They cited me for the same fence design they approved for the Morgans. I got fined for a tree removal they recommended to my neighbor. My violation notice came the day after I refused to sell. Karen banged her gavel repeatedly. This meeting will come to order. These allegations are baseless and coordinated to undermine community standards. Are 26 identical experiences in 5 years baseless, Mrs. Westfield? I asked, gesturing to the former residents in attendance. Or the audio recordings of dinner parties where official votes were predetermined before public meetings? I played a short clip from Marcus Washington's recording. Karen's voice filled the room. We need unanimous votes tomorrow on the Mitchell property. Leonard says that parcel is critical for Phase 3 development. Board members shifted uncomfortably, creating physical distance between themselves and Karen. The summit attorney whispered urgently in her ear. This meeting is adjourned pending consultation with legal counsel, Karen announced abruptly. Actually, Raymond interjected, state law prohibits adjournment while investigations of this nature are pending without a formal board vote. The community center doors opened. County Inspector Davis entered, accompanied by 2 deputies. Mrs. Westfield, I have documents requiring immediate service. He handed Karen an official envelope. This is a stop work order for all Summit development projects pending investigation of permit irregularities and conflicts of interest. The room erupted in chaos. Homeowners surrounded board members with questions and accusations. Karen's face drained of color as she scanned the documents. The Summit attorney attempted damage control. We request all homeowners refrain from discussion of these matters outside this meeting. These are merely allegations that will be addressed through proper channels. Raymond addressed the crowd. As county counsel, I advise all residents that you have every right to discuss these matters freely. Attempts to silence homeowners would constitute additional violations. Karen locked eyes with me across the chaotic room, her expression shifting from shock to fury to something resembling fear. In that moment, she finally recognized me not as a nuisance homeowner to be bullied into compliance, but as the architect of her unraveling empire. Summer sunshine bathed Pine Grove Estates in golden light as I sat on my grandfather's porch, sipping morning coffee. 3 months had passed since the confrontation at the community center. 3 months of depositions, evidence submissions, and legal proceedings. The headline in today's county newspaper told the latest development. Former HOA president and developer husband indicted on 32 counts of fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. The state attorney's investigation had expanded well beyond Pine Grove Estates, uncovering similar schemes in 6 communities across 2 counties. The Westfield's real estate empire was collapsing under legal scrutiny, with assets frozen and projects halted mid-construction. My phone rang, Raymond with an update. Civil case settlement offer came in this morning. They are offering full restoration costs for your workshop plus damages. And the Community Restoration Fund. That too. Full restitution for all affected homeowners, property value adjustments for those who sold under duress, and a governance reform package. I thanked him and hung up, gazing out at the activity in my side yard. Frank supervised as volunteers positioned roof trusses on the reconstructed workshop. The community rebuilding project had begun spontaneously after news of the investigation broke. My husband is good with electrical work, Mrs. Cooper had said when offering assistance. Least we can do after you helped expose what happened to all of us. Dozens of current and former residents contributed materials, labor, and skills. The new workshop followed my grandfather's original design but with improvements: better insulation, updated wiring, larger windows. A workshop worthy of his memory and craftsmanship. Inside my cabin, I had discovered an unexpected treasure while reorganizing his study. A leather-bound journal chronicled my grandfather's 30-year battle with the Westfield family. Thomas Westfield approached again about selling the lakefront portion, one entry read. When I declined, he threatened to make ownership uncomfortable. I will not be intimidated. This land represents my family's heritage and will pass to my grandson intact. The journal detailed grandfather's methodical documentation of Westfield tactics, his legal research, his small victories in preserving his property rights. I had unknowingly completed what he had begun, using the same methodical approach, the same commitment to justice. A car pulled into my driveway, Sophia Lawson, with advance copies of her investigative series. Predatory HOAs, the new land grab, had earned national attention and prompted state legislative reform proposals. The governor is establishing a task force on HOA governance, she explained, joining me on the porch. They want you to serve as a community representative. Under court supervision, Pine Grove Estates had established an interim management committee to rebuild proper governance. Elections held last month seated a diverse board focused on transparency and actual community standards rather than developer interests. The new board had asked me to serve as legal advisor to ensure compliance with governance reforms. Property values had already stabilized as the community's reputation for fairness spread throughout the county. As afternoon approached, volunteers gathered in my yard for a lunch break. Frank raised his glass in a toast. To Edward Mitchell, who fought the good fight, and to Tom Mitchell, who finished it. Cheers erupted from the group neighbors, who had transformed from intimidated individuals into a true community. My name indeed appeared on documents throughout the county, not just in legal filings against corrupt practices, but in the new HOA charter that protected rights rather than restricted them, in the Community Restoration Fund helping former residents recover losses, and in governance reform proposals spreading across the state. Standing on the porch of the cabin that had started it all, I watched as neighbors worked together to rebuild not just my workshop, but our sense of community. In the distance, beyond the trees that had sheltered my grandfather's property for decades, I could see the lake glittering in the afternoon sun, the same lake the Westfields had coveted for their development plans. The rebuilt workshop would never replace the original or restore grandfather's irreplaceable tools, but it represented something more valuable: the triumph of community over corruption, of justice over intimidation. Each nail driven, each board placed was an act of collective healing. As the sun began its descent behind the pines, I opened grandfather's journal once more. His final entry, dated just weeks before his passing, read, "I may not see the end of this struggle, but I have faith that truth endures longer than greed. The land will outlast us all. I only hope whoever continues this fight understands what truly matters is not just the property, but the principle." I closed the journal gently. "I understand now, Grandpa," I whispered, "and so does everyone else." The workshop would be completed tomorrow. The legal battles would continue for months. The community would take years to fully heal from the Westfield's predatory practices. But standing there, watching neighbors who had once been too frightened to speak now laughing and working side by side, I knew the most important victory had already been won. Sometimes justice arrives not as a thunderbolt, but as a steadily building wave that eventually sweeps away what never should have stood in the first place.